Which is my better side, Muse? I don't know. I don't care. This side or this side? Muse, I have something strange to talk to you about today. I kind of hesitated to bring this up, but I need to. I was actually discussing this very thing with a good friend of mine. He's a fellow writer, and we meet once a month or so-ish and have a beverage and talk about the world and things that are going on. And of course, inevitably, the discussion turns to writing. And he comes from a different perspective than I do, but that's neither here nor there. During our last conversation, I started talking about something, and it was kind of, for me, it was a revelation. And we all like a good revelation, don't we? I like a good revelation. Don't revelations start revolutions? Maybe. Hopefully. I was talking to this gentleman, this bloke, my mate, about the fact that next month I am going to start rehearsing a new show. I'm coming out of retirement as an actor, and I'm going to do a show. Maybe just one, I don't know. We'll see what happens. And I'm nervous as hell about it because I haven't been on stage for 10 years, maybe. And what I'm nervous about is just being able to memorize the words. Ho, ho, ho. But we're not going to talk about that. That's not what I want to talk about. When I mentioned that, we started talking about acting and as it pertains to my career and my process. And somehow I started discussing back when I was knee-deep in the world of acting, when I was actually making a living as an actor, which is unheard of these days, but well, it's not unheard of, it's just rare. I started talking about the fact that when I was an actor, I was constantly pushing myself. I was always finding new ways to push myself physically and vocally and mentally, and so I would go to any and all lengths to get where I needed to go for a role. Be that finding new ways to express something with my body, studying different things and really, really pushing myself physically. And I would constantly be stretching my range vocally and finding new paths to take emotionally and mentally to get to a role. And I did some really strange things. I remember during a production of Count Dracula, I was playing Renfield, and I spent an inordinate amount of time in the attic above the theater. I wanted to get this feeling of this character, of the world kind of pressing down on him, and this hunched over feeling and this isolation, and there was all this dirt and dust in this space, and it was great for me to explore various avenues of that role, and it bore a lot of fruit. And I studied clown and mime and dance, and although you probably wouldn't be able to tell it today that I studied dance, oops. And it was, for me, part of being an actor was always pushing myself, always discovering new ways to go from point A to point B. And it was exhilarating to begin a new role and know that the possibilities were endless within the confines of the story, of course, and the director's vision. But I could attack a role completely backwards than what maybe society would have perceived in order to discover something new, something untapped for that role. And should I come against a physical limitation of my body, then I would, outside of rehearsal, I would start to work on that limitation and overcome it. I remember at one point watching a video of myself, and the way I walked was unsettling to me, and I spent a great deal of time reteaching myself how to walk, which was challenging because I had a bone degenerative disease when I was a child, and I lost my right hip joint. And when they did whatever they did, they put a pin in my leg and they did all this other stuff. But in the end, the joint in my right hip is deformed, so my right leg is slightly shorter than the other. So it was incredibly challenging to get over that limitation. But I knew that if I worked hard enough physically, I would figure out a way to overcome it. And that was my life as an actor. And when I started thinking about that with regards to my career as a writer, things started to make sense to me. Because as a writer, I'm always searching for something. I'm never content with the results that I get. And I'm always thinking, okay, maybe I'll try this genre, I'll try this genre. And I started thinking, well, maybe I have been jumping from these different genres in hopes that exploring the realm of a new genre will inform the way I write universally, or the way I write within another genre. So maybe writing in steampunk will teach me something that I couldn't learn in horror. And writing in horror will help me to write darker and twistier thrillers. And writing Shiro will help me to develop even more of a sense of humor. But if I'm being completely and absolutely honest with myself, it's not enough. And I have to figure out a way to push myself as a writer. And I haven't figured that out yet. And I know that I've done flash fiction, I've done, even microfiction and novellas. I've done third person, I've done first person. I've tried all the tricks. And stream of consciousness. And I'm trying to find something that will help me push myself beyond the normal limitations of being a writer. And, and maybe it's going to be, maybe I'm going to have to. One of the things I loved about writing Frankenstein Theory was that it tested my ability to blend antiquated language with modern language. And that was one of the joys of writing that book for me, besides diving into the realm of that universe, because I love the Frankenstein stories. But maybe I need to go back. And I've been thinking that I needed to go back to that series. I want to write the sequel to Frankenstein Theory. I already know what it is. It'll be my take on the Bride of Frankenstein. But I think that there's something so fulfilling to me about writing a period piece, but make it accessible to modern readers, such that it has this flavor of the period in which it takes place, but it's not so overwrought with that kind of dated language that it turns people off. So there's, and I think that with Frankenstein Theory, I found this good merging of those two. And that was a great experiment for me. And probably I need to go back to it, because it was one of the most, it wasn't challenging because it was easy to write for me, but it was, I think in the end, it helped me to discover more about myself. And if I'm not discovering something about the process, then I feel like I'm doing something wrong. I always want to be learning. And, and that there's always this thing in the back of my head that every time I read a manuscript, when it comes back from my editor, and she makes notes, and I realize that I'm repeating the same mistakes over and over again, I go back and go, okay, I've got to learn this. I've got to figure out what I'm doing wrong here and learn from my mistakes. And there's just comes this point where you go, okay, it's really hard to learn. I mean, the English language is challenging anyway. And I know so many writers who can craft a good sentence, but then you ask them, and I'm one of them, and you ask about the actual sentence structure and real complicated sentence structure, and then it's like, them's words. And I still keep trying, and I'm not saying that I don't understand. I do understand. I would hope that I understand how to write, because if I don't, then what the hell am I doing? But I've got to find something to push me, to force me into uncomfortable areas that I can then not make them necessarily comfortable, because to make them comfortable means to kind of be content. And I don't I think contentment is the enemy of art. And I've always felt that way. I don't want to necessarily be content as an artist. I want to always feel like there's something that I'm chasing, knowing that I'll probably never catch it. And in that discussion and discovery, I realized that I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, even though sometimes it gets a little unnerving, I'm okay with that constant feeling of chasing something. Feeling like I'm climbing this mountain and the top is non-existent, but I keep climbing. And I think that that's just the plight of the artist. I think we willingly sign that contract when we decide to become an artist. And that contract says you will never, ever be satisfied. And we go, okay, I'll sign. I'm fine. I'm okay with that. As long as I'm doing what I love, I'm okay with being unsatisfied and always feeling like, what is missing? What is missing is the penultimate perfection. That's what's missing. And until we get it, we're going to feel this way. But the problem is we're never going to get it because perfect doesn't exist. But the journey, it's all about the journey. And for me, that journey is a joy and a struggle and sometimes an insufferable pain. And it sometimes leads to doubt and that grand old imposter syndrome. But there's something inside of me that says, if you are always chasing, if you are never motionless, as long as you are not content, you're doing something right. Yeah. All of that from a simple discussion with a friend. Those are the best. I hope, Muse, that you now understand me a little better. And I hope that I don't come across as an absolute madman, because sometimes I feel that way. I'm going to go put on my straitjacket. It's fashionable. It's what all the cool crazies are wearing these days. Come here, Muse. I really need a hug. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Closer. Closer. Closer.